But I'm Debra Boggs. I am a fellow chief sister, and I founded and run D&S Executive Career Management. We work with VP to board level leaders to prepare for and navigate their high level searches. So we're not a search firm. We don't do placements, but we're like the home stagers to make a luxury property look expensive before it goes on the market. So for us, that typically means, getting clear on your focus, and then resumes for career roles or board roles, board bios, LinkedIn profiles, and then that search strategy, interview prep, compensation negotiation, consulting, things like that. So my team and I really work with senior level leaders to prepare for and navigate their searches. And that's what we wanted to do today, is talk a little bit about the board interview process. And I'll introduce my team in a moment, but just to give us an idea of what this call will be like, we work with board level candidates all the time about preparing for this process. But as you know, the executive search and the board search are different. And what does that process look like? And sometimes, it can be a little nebulous to understand how to prepare for that kind of an interview, what you're going to be asked, things like that. And so Norma on my team has been building a guide out for board level interviews. And we thought we would get together as a group and have a facilitated conversation and learn from each other on what we've experienced in past board interviews, and just chat a little bit about what we've seen in the market. So this is what we're going to do today. And I will introduce Norma first. She'll be doing this call with me. Some of you may have met Norma a couple of weeks ago when we did a presentation on, or a guided conversation, I guess, really more on corporate outplacement. So you may have met her then, but Norma Dávila holds a Ph.D. in psychology from the University of Chicago, as well as a bachelor's degree from Yale. Her industry-leading certifications include Certified Interview and Compensation Negotiation Coach from Career Thought Leaders, as well as a Certified Professional Career Coach and a Certified Professional Resume Writer, both from the Professional Association of Resume Writers and Career Coaches. She has also co-authored several books for the Association of Talent Development, ATD, is a contributor to the Career Thought Leaders Consortium Career Industry Trends Report, and is often a speaker for organizations such as SHRM, Elevate, ATD, and many others. So I can't tell you how thrilled I am to get to work with Norma every day. We're so incredibly lucky to have her on our team, and I can't wait for you all to meet her. And then Carmen Poff is also on the call. Some of you may have met her. She really leads our client success and will be running the chat. And not that Carmen isn't amazing, but I didn't print out a bio to read for her, so I'm so sorry, but Carmen is amazing and works with me every day. And so many of you may have met her, but she'll be managing the chat and keeping things flowing. So with that, Norma, hi.
Let's see if this, yeah, we got it. Thank you, Debra, for the introduction. It's great to see everybody, and really thank you for joining us this afternoon. It's going to be an interesting conversation to talk about issues that matter to all of us. Those of us from the setting the stage and the part, and those of you from actually experiencing it. And it will be a lot of fun also having Carmen living vicariously through the chat with all these experiences, as she said, traveling with all of us. And Debra, I think we're ready to get started with our first questions.
Wonderful. Thanks so much. So what we're going to do is just pose a question to the group. This is a large group. There's about 50 of us on the call now. So we'll do our best to facilitate conversation between everyone. So if you have an answer or something you'd like to add to the conversation or a question, please raise your hand and we'll do our best to kind of get to everybody. But I'm really excited for this opportunity to learn from each other. So the first question to kind of get us started is, how have you experienced interviews for board seats to be different than interviews for C-level roles? And I would love to know if anyone has sat through the board interview process and what that has looked like, how that's been different, how that feels different. And I can't see everyone. Anyone have a hand up? If not, we can go ahead and share our thoughts from what we've seen with clients. Oh, are there? I don't see them. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't see them either.
Hands.
Oh, you said no hands. Got it. No problem.
Now we have a hand.
Sophie's got her hand up. Now we've got someone.
I'm happy to come in. Yeah. So the context is that I'm still an executive. I do have a trustee role that therefore, I obtained through interviews. I interviewed for other NED role, but wasn't successful. Although in one instances, I was down to 2 candidates. So a small experience of interviews, but not inexistent. I didn't think the interviews were very different from an executive interview, except that, the experience that we were focusing on were, I suppose, more around governance and how I interact with my current board, the skills and expertise that are more related to being part of a board. But otherwise, I didn't feel like it was a huge departure. But maybe, I figure, maybe this is because I need to actually understand the differences better and to be more successful.
Well, we can definitely work on that together. But I have a follow-up question to that. So I know a lot of candidates have a lot of questions around the board governance piece. What do you remember off the top of your head what some of those questions around governance looked like?
It was more, what is your experience at a board level? Do you understand the difference between, I think it's to test the understanding of the difference between being responsible for something or being accountable for something. Yes. So being the managing the management oversight or the board of management, oversight or board oversight. So being able to step away a little bit more and not being too hands-on. I think this was to test that, the understanding of that approach.
I love that. The difference between being responsible for something versus being accountable. That's such a great point, and one of the biggest differences. Absolutely. Does anyone have anything to add to this?
Yes, we have somebody here who was saying in the chat that she wants to contribute, and I'm losing her.
That's
Debra.
Debra.
Oh, Debra, there.
Hi,
There we go.
everybody. Sorry, for some reason I can't raise a hand. I'm literally just raising my hands. I can't
We
make
got you.
the little the hand sign come up. What I was going to say is I've been sitting on the other side of the fence from Sophie, and so what I've done is interviewed exec and non-exec directors. So I've been chief exec and a non-exec director. So I'm probably a bit further down the road than some people. And there is a real difference in board level jobs when you're a non-exec to being an exec. So an exec job is very much focused on your, Sophie said, really, your experience so far and, how would you do the job? What do you bring? I think a non-exec job is much more difficult to interview for. And when I see people do interviews, they are very frequently expecting it to be the same as an executive interview. So they tend to tell you what they've done in their job rather than looking at the business. They often are very unfocused on what the business needs. They haven't thought about shareholder views or, sort of stakeholder views. And so often there's a massive gap between what you would be expected to do as a non-exec and the preparation that you've clearly done for the interview. So I'd say it's much harder to prep for a non-exec role than probably an exec role. Most of us have had experience of what the exec experience would look like. So I think they're two different approaches. That was all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thanks.
No, that's helpful. I really appreciate that, especially since you've sat on that side of the table. And tell us, I think there's a little bit of a difference in the vocabulary from the UK and the US on the non-executive director. So we would think of that as a board member that doesn't work for the company, right? So for everyone in the US who's like, what's an NED?
So a non-exec director is, maybe you don't have them. I guess you do. They're sort of there to keep you on the straight and narrow, really. So you work for the business, but you earn fees rather than you're not technically an employee. But really, you're there to represent the views of the shareholders rather than the company, which is there to sort of manage themselves. So you're holding the board and the executive team to account around governance issues and the way that they are running the business. So it's a slightly different emphasis. Yeah, I'll look it up. I genuinely don't know what it's called in the States. I'll have a look while we're talking.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's where, and I think the easiest way to think about it for those of us in the US is that you can pretty much assume the non-executive director is the board director in the US, right? So just so that we have our vocab straight and we understand what everyone's talking about, that's what that looks like. And And so, and that can be, you know, I know Sophie mentioned NED interviews, same thing, board level interview. Anyone have anything else to share? This is great. Elif.
Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. My one anecdote I would love you to address down the line is some of us have quite a bit of nonprofit experience where we were fiduciary to a nonprofit, but translating that as a board experience to a for-profit entity requires a little bit of nuance, I think. Many of the skills of holding an organization responsible to its constituents or fiduciary are similar, but I don't know that they're always perceived as qualified or similar. So I would just sort of throw that out there to ask that you address that, hopefully down the road.
Yeah, I can address it briefly, and then I'd love to hear, you know, Norma's thoughts on this too, and if anyone else has thoughts on this. We don't often see nonprofit board seats being a qualifier to getting a for-profit board seat. The caveat to that is unless it's a large organization. And so I think the biggest difference that I try to, you know, advise our clients on is, so I had a client recently who said, well, I've been on a couple of nonprofit boards, but I don't really want to list it because it doesn't count. Well, the nonprofit boards were a health system with $1 billion P&L. That does count, right? That's a big deal. I think so. I think it's the size of an organization matters. You know, if it's your, you know, neighborhood HOA, probably not worth listing. But if it's a large organization, complex organization, a lot of governance, a lot of compliance, a large budget, then that's something that you can definitely lean on those skills. And I'd love to hear what Norma has to say too.
Yes, I would add that a lot of it has to do with the complexity of the decisions that you had to make and that you contributed to make. That it can even be a smaller organization, but you had to take it through changes and policy implementations and basically turning it into something else. All of that is going to search. Count. Yes. So all of that is going to count. And our approach is more, let's hear about it, let's put it out on the table, and then see how we can make it fit for what you want, because what's important for one board may not necessarily be as important for another one. So that's where we get to tweak information. The essence is there, your experience is there, and we want to focus on what you bring, regardless of the where. And we'll help you get to the where.
Yes, Carol, exactly. Major universities, nonprofit institutions, highly complex, political, and that's a great point too. You can also lean on your ability to work with other people on the board, other personalities, understand the governance, chair a committee, things like that, especially in larger, complex organizations, to show that you understand what that piece looks like too.
Yeah, start working on your building blocks. You don't have to start as a chairperson. You were part of a committee, you were part of an advisory group. All that board related experience that you gain over the years is going to help you to get started and then start moving forward.
Absolutely.
So
add to that as far as your experience in nonprofit and then switching over to for-profit.
Yeah, I've seen it happen already, so it can be done.
Yes,
We have
it absolutely can be.
As a policy leadership board role for the junior league, depending on which organization you're going for.
Yeah, it would depend. And the size of the junior league. I mean, the junior league in Portland, Maine, where I am, is very small. I know the junior league in New York City is a large organization. So it depends. Any other thoughts to this before we move on to the next question? This was great. Thank you all. All right, so let's talk about, for those of you that have sat into this process, either as an executive who was looking at potential board members, or as a board member who's gone through the interview process, who participates in the interview process? Who do you typically interface with? Does anybody want to weigh in on this? Maybe Sophie, if you want to tell us who was in those calls.
So I think generally well, generally, if there was an executive search agency involved, that would be the first screen, and then if that was successful, I think generally I spoke to the CEO before I spoke to the chair.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Okay, perfect.
And then other board members, just to so that they could have a broader view, I think, of the fit.
Yeah, and was that all board members or just a handful?
A selection of board members. It was not all. A selection of board members or trustees. Yeah, not everyone.
Okay, perfect. And Debra. Oh, you're muted.
Sorry, I was muted. We would use an agency and we would basically take forward 4 candidates. So if you get through, you're in quite a small group. And then we did a panel interview for the first sort of proper interviews, which would have been about 4 of the directors, including myself and the chairman. And then we took 2 through to another group of directors, including our CFO. We had 7 directors, so it was a relatively small group. So most of the legwork was done by the recruitment search firm rather than us. We trusted them to find us some good candidates, and then once to be honest, any of them could have done it. By the time you get to that stage, it's about personal fit, experience, how well they're prepared for the interview, and what they bring that you think will be different to what you've already got on the board. So sometimes it's just a matter of luck. Have you got something that the board are really looking for?
I love it. Matter of preparation and fit and and that personal fit is so important at that point. And you bring up a really good point. When we talk to our executive candidates, whether it's for a VP to C-level role or a board role, at this point, you're competing against highly capable people. And not only do you need to put your accomplishments forward and really be able to explain your value, you also need to win the role, right? Because you're going up against incredible competition. So that's a really good point. I'm glad you brought that up. Catherine.
Yeah. Think about what's your sparkle. What do you bring that somebody else is everybody else will have the same stuff because you're clearly there. So what's the sparkle bit that you bring? So that's really important, I think. And it's a women thing. Don't underestimate how good you are. Men come in and tell us how fantastic they are. Women come in and go, oh yeah, I've done a little bit of, I've taken some minutes for Little League, the equivalent of, just big yourself up, talk about what you've done. You're there because you're already on the slate. Just talk about what's the sparkle.
This is such a good point. And before Catherine, and I know you're going to weigh in on this too, but I do tell my female candidates that, we have to not be humble. Really, we have to communicate our value and not diminish our accomplishments, because our male candidates aren't doing that. And so if you're going up against someone that you're equally qualified against, but you're holding yourself back, that's not helping anybody. Catherine, sorry.
Yeah, I wanted to confirm what others have said, that in my experience, and I've been on a lot of not-for-profit boards, but I've been trying to become an independent director on a for-profit board for a while, and I've had a couple of interviews. I am a physician, so generally I'm in the position where they're looking for a doctor to round out the board. So it's almost like I'm looked at as a doctor rather than as a person who has incredible, experience and other things. And there was one where I had great interviews. I started with the chairman of the board, and then I talked to someone on the nominating committee. But like 6 months later, they got back to me and said, "Oh, they hired a new CEO, and they decided they didn't need a doctor on the board." So I wonder, it could be the same maybe with CFOs or finance. I just wonder if people have also had that kind of experience where you're looked at more from almost your technical, as well as your ability, of course, to be a good board member, which is something I always do here in these interviews. Is they're really looking for someone who can collaborate, who will, add value in terms of really being able to have robust discussions.
Can I echo that? I will say, I'm also a physician. I will say that I've landed on a couple of things with that, and I'll just share.
Yes.
Firstly, there is a mind map that people hear when they hear doctor, and they can't get themselves out of it. And I don't think physicians help themselves in that piece either. They see you as, I'm going to save you, I'm going to treat your cold, and there's probably nothing else you know how to do. They don't see you as one of the getting into med school is no small task. And it requires a level of learning and experience and things that risk and all these things that are skills. And they have trouble with that. I think that's one, when they see it in a woman, that's an extra level of trouble. But two, it's also threatening. Because and this is not to diminish anybody's, lots of careers are difficult. My daughter's in film and TV, lots of careers are difficult. But this society holds physicians in a certain regard historically. And so now you're trying to play on my turf. Well, the opportunity cost to get that medical degree versus the opportunity cost to some other, there are some societal biases that start coming into this competition, and it's threatening, I've noticed. And then add to that any other dimension of difference. And so how do you then articulate the value proposition while understanding that these people have already bucketed you here? And I see it. So I just offer that you're not the only one feeling this. I've seen it play out. I've had product roles. I've had C-level roles. I've had all these business sort of roles. And it comes out in every conversation, whether you try to de-emphasize it yourself, it doesn't matter. And I don't have an answer, but I would love to just share that you're not alone.
Thanks. No, I appreciate that. Yeah, I've had all those roles too. I mean, it's not as if I am a physician, but I'm also an executive and had major enterprise leader roles. And it just, I think it's for all of us. I think it's just taking time, and also it's great to have venues like this where you can kind of share experiences with people and hear advice.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will say, this is something that happens with other candidates as well, around being seen as a one-dimensional candidate, and then only having that one spot on a board, right? And so if there's only one spot for, say, a physician, or we see it a lot with general counsels. So if you're, the chief legal officer or general counsel, or you're maybe the CHRO, and you don't want to be seen as just the people person or just the legal and compliance person, then what we say is around what Debra had mentioned earlier is this and that, right? We see it with DEI leaders too, who want to come onto the seat, and maybe a board only has one spot for a DEI leader. And it's okay, how are you communicating that value? So I have a longtime client who's a physician entrepreneur, and we lead in his board documents and in his bio and everything, his business leadership all the way to the bottom. And oh, by the way, he's a Stanford educated physician, right? And so, but we have to lead with what we want people to remember about us, and you also then fit the bill as the physician. So we see that a lot with, like I said, a lot general counsel, CHROs, things that kind of get pigeonholed, but you also have so much other value to add to a business. So it's really understanding what that looks like. Mercedes.
Debra, I'm sorry. Before I get to Mercedes, I just want to jump in and add something. Debra was mentioning the different recruiting firms that look for candidates. And I think it's really important to make sure that we are on their radars by networking, by being present in activity, so that we can get them to see us beyond those pigeonhole roles that we're talking about. People go for the people they know. So the more comprehensive view of ourselves that these agencies can present to boards, the greater the likelihood that we're going to get in there. So thanks. Sorry, Mercedes. Thank you for waiting.
No worries.
Such a great point.
No worries. So I have a comment, a story, and a question. So the comment is for board interviews, the ones that I've been on, typically you have the CEO is the first one that you talk to, and then after that is the board chair. And if that goes well, then the majority of the times they ask you to talk to the rest of the board members, because in the end they all have to vote. So they all want to talk to you, and they all want to get to know you to see how you're going to work with them, and if you're going to be a good fit. So those are the typical people involved. The story is, I'm in the area of robotics technology, and I was the last two candidates for a board position in a billion-dollar company that creates robots. That's what they sell. They sell robots. And it was me and someone that I know, because the robotics community is very small. The other person was a male, and he's the type of person who said, if he looked at a piece of code, he would tell you, oh yeah, I wrote this. I know all about that code. and I'm the person who says, yeah, look at the piece of code. So I would say what you said, Debra, is absolutely right. You have to figure out how you stand out, because the guy who got the board position, he has no reservations in telling you that he's 10 times better than he really is. And in this situation, he actually got the board seat. So we as women need to either find somebody to help us stand out in our board bios or in your resumes, or do a lot of practice and just kind of toot our own horn if we want to get all those board roles. And the last question that I have is, in every single interview, there's always what would you like to know, or what question do you want to ask us? And I would imagine that with your experience, there's got to be some question that would be, hey, you're going to wow them if you ask him this question. And if anyone has an opinion of what is that question that you would ultimately ask, to make sure that you stay in their mind as the person who asks like the most interesting question or the most important question for the board role. So if anyone has an answer to that, I would love to hear that.
Oh, I love that. That's a really great point, Mercedes, and we can touch on that. Well, actually, we'll take follow-up to that, and then we'll go to Lori. And I think, one of them is to show, going back to what Debra had mentioned, showing the preparation and pulling in the question that's really focused on that organization, and maybe where they're headed is helpful too. But did someone have their hand raised to weigh in on
Lori.
Mercedes's question?
Lori has a question or comment.
Comment.
Maybe not related to Mercedes, and I'm going to be looking for some information here.
Yeah, not related to Mercedes, so please go ahead and continue that thread if you would like.
Did anyone have a follow-up on that? Sherry?
May I pop in as a salesperson in much of my career? Isn't that last question what you want to find out where you stand? So isn't it related to, do you have any concerns that would stop you from hiring me as the number one candidate, or suggesting I'm the number one candidate for the board? Would that not be, does it have to be more around your curiosity or company related, or can it really be just about yourself and how far away you might be from getting that number one position?
It's so interesting you asked that question. And I would love Norma's thought on this too. This came up the other day. I was talking to a chief compliance officer who said that her best friend is a sales leader, and said, I need to be asking for the job at the end of the interviews, but that seems so uncomfortable for me as a chief compliance officer. And I said, well, it depends on the role. If you were in a sales role, because she said at the end of the interviews, I should be asking, for the job. I should be reiterating my interest in. And I said, that's absolutely true, and something we would absolutely expect in a sales role. In a compliance role, it can be a little more nuanced because your job is different. And so it may be around, challenges or what might be coming up. So I'd love to know, Norma, I'm going to stop yapping for a second and let you weigh in on this, but it came up just the other day.
Yeah, no, you're not yapping. And I was looking for exactly examples that we've already created and generated to answer that question. So that's why I was all over the place. But definitely asking what concerns do you have about me comes across as you're self-confident and you're ready to manage objections.
Yes.
Right then and there. And they may not be expecting that from a woman from the conversation that we've been having so far, but it's your chance to be able to deal with them, clarify, and show that you're it. You're the person they've been looking for, the perfect candidate, without having to wait for another round of interviews or anything else. Now, in terms of other experiences and other questions, you may want to check on the types of the culture that they have and ask them, even though you've already researched that, you just want to validate it. And always tie back whatever comment you bring to the role, to what you can do, and to emphasize your capabilities for the role. I hope that helped, Debra.
No, this is great. Thank you. And so we'll pause that there and move to Lori, who I know it's not a physical hand raise, but she's had it for a while. So
yeah, no, that's all good. It's all good. And what a great conversation, and to be, around all this expertise. But I do sit on a board, and one of the things so far I haven't heard as part of the discussion is private versus public boards. So still a paid director role. And I'm on a private board very intentionally because my background is public companies, big, large public companies, CHRO. And when you have to really be careful. There's so much before you even get to the interview, which is I've learned, which is, of course, conflict of dates. Those are non-negotiable. So I ran with the board, my public company chair compensation committee. So if I was asked to be on a couple of boards and I looked at the schedule and was exactly my public company's schedule. So it immediately, there's so many different variables that cancel you out, and you have no, that's why it's so hard, and the patience is so important. So not only is it date conflict that you have to be careful, but it's also conflict with job, right? So you have to be really settled, because once you make a commitment to a board, it's for multiple years. And if you're thinking about moving your job, you have to be very careful on who you sign up with, because the conflict of interest knocks so many people out. And then just to have the public boards are great. That's my operating job, but it is so much fun being on a private board, because you don't have to deal with, proxies and this and this and this and this.
The SEC.
SEC, and I have to do that in my day job, but I never hear women in this kind of forum talking about it's not just board allows you to move into a public board, because if they IPO, you often stay on because they want to keep the board intact. So and it's a very different interview process, right? So the private boards want to know, how have you influenced in your operating role? How did you interact with the board? How do you influence them? What do you expect from your board members? So you could bring that richness from your operating role into some of those discussions, particularly in a private setting. And then I think that it is all about asking your network to put you in touch with people that are on boards, because it's always about, and now I'm the comp chair of my private board, and we have a board opening spot, but we know exactly what is missing from the board. So we're going to target finance, diversity, we want to increase the diversity of the board, but finance is missing. And so sometimes, it's then going to my networks of CFOs. So I know there's a board opening, for example, and I go to my network. So it's good to let your network know, oh, I bring this, please let me know. And that's how those introductions happen. So that's just my experience. And then once you cross all the conflict of interest, the dates, is that seat equal to your background, and what is your current board exposure in your operating role, then it's like a slam dunk. Like you have the conversation around, I want to influence, I want to be not get into the weeds, I want to be an advisor. But if you cross all of those things, it becomes like a conversation that is delightful. Do you see what I mean?
I love that. And there's you made so many good points in there. That was really rich comments. So I really appreciate that. A couple of things I'd like to reiterate that Lori just said, and it comes up a lot with our clients, because we work with, executives who could have rich careers, they do all have rich careers, and they could do a lot of different things. And we meet them at the point of them getting ready to do a transition. They'll say, I'm interested in a new C-level role, or, a new career role, but I also would like to be on boards. And we always suggest, if you're looking for both, do the career role first. because first of all, the search for a board seat is just like a job search, right? You have to put time and effort into that. And on the off chance you get the board seat first, then you may immediately find yourself in a conflict of interest situation for your career role if you were to land that next one. And that's not going to look good if you have to step off or turn down a really great opportunity for a board seat that may not pay what your career role would have. So always focus, if you're in a moment of transition, on your career first, and then the board seat will follow. And the other piece I'd like to reiterate that you had mentioned is talking about your board level exposure. A lot of people who are looking for their first seat say, how do I get a board seat if I've not done a board role? And we always say, focus on your board adjacent work. So influencing the board, working directly with the board in some way, working at that executive leadership team where you're driving strategy for the organization company wide, anything like that, that board adjacent work where you have exposure to the group really helps communicate that you're board ready and you understand corporate governance. And I'll stop there. Any other thoughts on that before we move on? This has been really great.
Well, I think that we're coming together. I mean, we're coming back to the issue of having people meet people, know people, and getting them to know what you're doing, tooting our own horns. So
yes,
let's keep that in
tooting
mind.
our own horns.
Yeah, and people have to know that you've done it.
Yeah, everyone has to, and we have to be really clear, as women, on our value to be able to communicate it.
Yes.
And sometimes that's the hard part, is understanding the value that we bring. And I know we're working with a candidate right now. CEO has had amazing career. She's looking for keynote speaking opportunities, and we're doing a new LinkedIn profile and a bio for her for keynote speaking. She's amazing. I've actually hosted her as a keynote speaker for a conference that I'm a part of. She's absolutely fantastic. But when we were going through the process, she didn't want to list her awards because it felt braggy.
Oh.
And she has national awards and she's highly accomplished, but she didn't want to be too forward with her accomplishments because she didn't want to seem like she was bragging. This happened yesterday. And we said, okay, well, what are the criteria that you look at when you're hiring a speaker to speak to your team? What does that criteria look like? And she thought about it and she said, okay, fine, we can add the awards. But I think, our knee-jerk reaction is to not be too much, right? But that's putting us at a disservice.
Not owning our careers.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Owning your career, owning your work. So for those of you that have been through this process, again, either as part of the executive team or as a board member, how many rounds of interviews can you expect? And one of the questions in that is, I know, many of you have said that you interview with several members of the board. Is there a panel interview at some point, or are you interviewing with everyone individually in individual conversations? What does that look like? Oh, Sophie says it depends on the size of the board. That's helpful.
Yeah, and also you talk to the CEO first, the chair second, and sometimes the CEO and the board chair are in the same meeting. And then in your next meetings afterward, it could be 2 or 3 people or just one, depending on the company.
Perfect. That's helpful. Has anyone else had a different experience? Lori, what have you seen? Can you weigh in on this?
Sure. So my experience on the few that I've interviewed with is CEO, chairman, like everybody has said. And then often there's they'll fly. My experience was, a few conversations virtual, but then a dinner I went to that had 2 board members in New York. They're like, let's grab, dinner and such. And it was, it's so different than an operational role. So you're just having a conversation. You're talking about stuff that you think about and how you see the world. And it's not like, I know these deliverables or I measure my success based on X, Y, and Z. It's like, oh, yeah, I've experienced this and I've thought through it this way, and I could support management in this way. So using the words like supporting management is like the key, right? Not that you want to do management's job. And so I feel like it was just like really from very, positive conversations that culminate all your experience and who you are and how you show up and how excited you are about the organization and how you think about things is really the conversation. But it was like dinner. Do you know what it was? Very, I don't know how else to say it.
It's an interview that doesn't look like an interview, but it is an interview and you're eating.
Completely. And it could be over the phone too, but
yeah,
it wasn't a set of, it's so different than an operational role, and you just have to show up as you are. But there's so many things you have to cross off the box before you even get to those conversations. By the time you get to it, it's like really a conversation. It's not testing your skills per se on, did I do a system implementation for Workday? It's nothing like that.
Right. Yeah. It's past that. You're not being brought on to operate and be the doer. You're an influencer and an advisor and supporter of the management. That's a perfect way to put that. Debra.
There was one area that we haven't really touched on, and I think is really important because it feels like all of the conversations have been, how do I get on the board? But remember, I mean, maybe this is more true in the UK and the EU, but I don't think so. Once you sign up to a board, it's forever on your CV. You have to declare that job forever. So if you join a board which has a poor reputation or goes bust, or you have some sort of issue or incident, you will never get rid of that stain. And you have to fill in I'm on a listed board, you have to fill in a declaration to say what sort of board you've been on. And you will find that it can really impact your career if you've chosen badly. So a lot of this debate isn't them talking to you, it's you interviewing them. You're really putting your career on the line here. So as much as some of the questions, somebody said, what's a good question? The question that needs to come from you is, yes, I'd like to join your business and I'm interested in it, but the questioning should be around, how do I feel confident that this is something that I want to put my time and my reputation into? And that I think, Laurie, you spoke about having dinner and so on, and as much of it is about you talking to them and thinking, would I like to work with you guys? Because it's a really different job from being an executive, and you do come under pressure and they have to like you and you have to get along, and you need to be seen as a cooperative individual. You're not there to take charge, you're not there to boss people around, you're there to facilitate and support the executive management teams do their job, and that's really crucial.
And you're going to be making a lot of uncomfortable decisions with people, so you need to make sure that you are comfortable with each other to actually be able to get this, to move the board forward. So it's a mutual.
Yeah, you bring up a great point about reputation too. You're hitching your wagon to a company that you can't actually lead, right? You're a member of the board, but you're not the CEO, and so you're not, and you're one of the governing board members, and that means that you don't necessarily get to determine the direction of the company and some of their decisions and the things that they may do publicly or privately, and that can impact your reputation moving forward. And the other piece is, because it's forever, I always tell people too, a lot of women, when they start, men too, but more women, when you start searching for a board role and you think, I want to be on a board, and then you take the first thing that comes along because you were excited someone let you on the board, right? I mean, we don't always think we're going to get chosen, right? You get chosen by an opportunity that maybe isn't either your area of expertise or your passion area. You're going to spend a lot of time and energy thinking about that company, thinking about the future of that organization, having a hand in where they're headed. And you want to make sure that it's an organization you care about, right? That you want to spend time with. It could be a really great opportunity, but if it's not with an organization that's maybe in your professional wheelhouse, then it's more of a distraction than it is something that's helping drive your career forward. So think about that too. Yeah, Elif.
Elif has.
Can you expand on the vetting of the reputation of the board members in the organization that you might consider joining? I find that really hard to do. There's not a lot of information out there. You know, you're making nice lunch, dinner, whatever the interactions are, but you know, people, it's hard. How do you, is there a rubric to doing that where you can feel confident that joining this organization is of value add and de-risk anything, you know, for your career?
Yeah, I have some thoughts, but I'm going to let Norma weigh in on that, I think, first, and then I have some thoughts on kind of what I would suggest. But Norma, if you want, do you have anything you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, I think that part of what you want to do is just like you're doing the research for any other interview panel, you want to go through your network and start finding out what's been going on, what these people have done, what's been their style. People talk to each other, and I'm finding that in board communities, there's a lot of interconnectivity. I mean, just it's almost like another culture, like another club, so to speak. So that would be my first approach, besides what's public. And depending on the type of organization, you may be able to get public information on them from probably financial institutions. And Debra, you probably have contacts with like more Wall Street type organizations that have been, where you can get actually that type of data for the different board members.
Yeah, if it's a public company, you can definitely dig into the SEC proxy statements and look at, you know, past board members. But if it's a private company, I would ask to speak to a couple of past board members just to get a little bit of information, or, you know, trying to find some of those past board members, because we have to remember in our careers and on these board seats, they're courting you and they're not going to air their dirty laundry, right? They're going to be putting on their best foot forward, right? And sometimes companies and people aren't always self-aware to know what their dirty laundry is too. So sometimes they may be telling you things with the best of intentions that isn't actually related to reality at all, right? I think we've all been in that situation too. So I think, you know, a red flag to me is if you don't have the opportunity, if you ask to speak to everyone on the board, if you're not given that opportunity, that would be a red flag for me.
Also, if you ask to find out what the composition of the board is, in case you haven't found out yet, and there aren't any women or there aren't any members of a group you belong to, that may be something to consider. In one way, you may be brought in just to take care of that need, but at the same time, it could be a totally different type of environment where you feel like you're being singled out because you're this or that, and you probably don't want that.
Can I ask a follow-up?
Yeah.
Oftentimes for these positions, at least my experience is a recruiter has an external headhunter, not part of the company or the board, has been charged with bringing in candidates. And I posted in the chat one, you know, some of these folks cross lines or say things, and already you're kind of like, I don't want to hold that organization accountable for a misstep that an external entity does, but at the same time, you know, how do you vet that or navigate that stickiness? Because, you know, you may want to vet the organization for yourself.
Well, Debra and I were talking about something like that just when we were preparing for this. And it's an issue of if somebody just greets you with those types of questions that you pointed out, it tells you about the organization, because very likely those types of questions have been going on and been asked of other people. And
so this is a recruiter, but not the organization. So this was my question. Still,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, still, I mean, it's there because one represents the other. And
okay, that was what I was getting to. Okay.
Sounds like if that's the first thing they're asking, it's because that's the top criteria.
That's
interesting. You know, where I would add grace is, and especially it doesn't happen as much in board vetting, but for C-level roles and things like that, you know, maybe the sourcer or the first person at an executive search firm that talks to you is like 23 and they're just checking boxes, right? And they don't understand your work, and this just happens, especially at the larger firms where, you know, you're getting through a lot of candidates. And so they're doing those pre-screen calls. I wouldn't put too much weight on that. But if you're talking to an experienced recruiter who's representing the company and you're a little further into the conversation, that would be a red flag for me too.
Okay. So okay, that was what I was getting at, because I'm trying to get a framework in my head of how to navigate for my interests and my safety without burning bridges to people who have sort of this peanut buttered across many companies. You don't want to get on the wrong side of an individual like that, because that could affect something else. And that's the delicate dance I'm trying to get a rubric in my head around, so I'm not caught off guard and I can navigate that well.
Oh, you want to address the concern rather than the question when they ask you? Try to figure out if they're worried about your time commitments or your ability to make the meetings or your capacity to do whatever, rather than the label they may be putting on you.
Okay.
That may be a way to address it and get more information.
Thank you.
Yeah, Norma's good with that. She mentioned the other day, how do you handle that question? It's a bunch of different ways you can handle it, but one of them may be, instead of answering the question, what is the concern, that's causing the question, right?
I just wanted to add on the due diligence question. In the UK, I would advise to check the company's house register to make sure that all the filings have been done in time, and also see whether there has been a lot of churn of directors on the company. How long it existed. How long each director stayed on, and whether there was any delays, not just that year but the previous years in filing the annual accounts. That is a important hygiene factor, and then also on the if they're regulated, you can look at the regulator's website. I know for financial services, you would look at the FCA website for details on who has been approved as an SMF, etc.
That's a good point. And thank you for translating for those of you that are in Europe. That's helpful. One more question. I know we're getting towards the end, but I have one more question that I would love to get to. And then Norma and I do have some time. So if anyone wants to stay on, continue this conversation, we're happy to stay on for a little while longer. But one question I would love to ask all of you who have been in this process before is, what are some lessons you've learned from missteps during board level interviews, either that you've witnessed a candidate do, that you feel like maybe you've done? What are some lessons learned that we can all take as advice moving forward? Yeah, Elif.
And I posted it in the chat. I finally got to a way to ask the question of, like, what are you really looking for, without asking, what are you really looking for? and it's not my question, but I'll offer it, is before you go into all of this, I think it's important to nail down what is that hook that they're really looking for, without being rude about it. So the question that I've been honing and seems to work is, when they say, do you have any questions about this? I said, well, if you had 2 or 3 equally qualified candidates, what would be the 1 or 2 things that would make you say this person over the other 2? And that usually gets them to the thing that they're looking for. And that tends to open the window of, okay, if I'm going into this thing and these are the 2, maybe 3 things that are the hook, what do I have? Someone said sparkle. What is my sparkle for these things? Or make sure that you're like focused on some of that. That's the biggest lesson, because before that I was going and sort of just kind of going in, preparing in my usual way without really spending time to understand what they wanted.
Yeah, that's an excellent question.
Yeah, that's a great way to get at what they want and at what you have, and figure out if you want to meet them halfway or somewhere in the continuum they're looking for. And if you're not exactly what they're looking for and you still want it to be in the board, to find a way to present yourself differently before you close. Highlight what you've brought more than what you don't have.
Right. Any other lessons learned, missteps you've witnessed, things to avoid?
Landmines.
Landmines, yeah. Anything in there? Is there anything from any of you that have sat in these interviews that you recognized as red flags, or maybe red flags that a candidate should look out for in the process? Catherine or Lori, if you have anything to add to those. Okay. Norma, do you have any off the top of your head?
Well, when questions get personal, that would be a red flag. We talked about uncomfortable situations before, and we talked about what doesn't feel right. But I think that if they get personal, like, I mean, I've heard stories of how did you make it this far at your age, or anything age, gender, family related doesn't belong in the boardroom. And it would definitely be a turnoff for me if I were a candidate. And I'm, from the faces and the responses I'm seeing here, a lot of other people feel the same way. So that would be one area, just like you do for regular executive roles.
Yep, that's a good point. Absolutely.
All those
Yeah,
categories.
if they are asking questions that make you think, that was weird.
Yeah, do I want to be with these people when things get tight?
All right. Well, I'd love to hear maybe what some of your takeaways were from this conversation. Either pop it in the chat or share with us. I hope that everyone got something out of this conversation. I know it's more of a casual learning from each other experience and not necessarily a presentation. But I hope that it did add value. I know it certainly did for us. And is there any other end questions you either have for us or for the group?
I'm seeing great comments here.
Yeah, absolutely.
There was a question, Deborah, I'm going to pop in here really quickly. There was a question asked early on by Lindsay, and some of it was answered, but she's just looking for, wondering how to prepare and accumulate relevant experience to be a good candidate. So just wondering if you had anything else to add. There were, I think, a lot of good tips that fit as a good answer to that, but if there was anything else.
Yeah, absolutely. This is actually a topic I speak on a lot. If those of you haven't sat in on one of my board positioning yourself for board seats webinars, let me know. Happy to host one. I do this a lot actually around how you position yourself for board level roles in your value proposition, in your skills, and then translating that into your resume and your bio. And it also includes a lot around what makes a qualified candidate. But to give you an idea, a couple of the markers that make a qualified board candidate or a candidate that's board ready is to have deep experience, right? At least 15 years is going to be the marker for that. Having either deep industry experience or deep functional knowledge. So like I believe Lori said earlier, they need finance, so they need a CFO. Maybe someone needs deep industry experience. It depends on the organization. And then, board, at least board adjacent experience, and then something that might make you stand out around, experience into exits, M&As, IPOs, things like that. But it really, I'm going to back up and say the very first thing you need to do, and again, we have a whole presentation on this, so we can dig in if anyone has questions, but the first thing you need to do is get really clear on your focus, on your ideal board opportunity. What kind of a board would you be uniquely qualified to serve? And then you can have a better idea of what challenges those kinds of companies are going through right now, what matters to them right now. And then you can put your, and then think about where your blind spots are in terms of skills and things like that. Maybe it's an understanding of corporate governance. And if so, there's countless board readiness programs. They're not necessarily required to get a board seat, but it is helpful to give you all the vocabulary and understanding of governance, like Sophie had mentioned in the beginning of the call. So the answer is really long, but it starts with getting really clear on your focus.
Yes, like everything else we've been talking about, it's knowing where you want to go so that you can figure out your path. And if you need to develop your skills in whatever area, make sure that you get your development plan so you're ready for when the opportunity comes.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Any other questions? And I can definitely host another, I do it occasionally for different groups and usually of women or potential board candidates. So happy to do that. It's it's like a workshop.
Yeah, they're asking for it.
Yeah, we can do that. I'll put that on the calendar. All right. Well, I appreciate everyone joining this call. This was really, really helpful for us. Again, I hope you got something out of it. It was really great to meet so many new faces too. So thank you for joining us. Reach out to us, connect with us on LinkedIn. Norma and I and Carmen regularly share information on the executive job search strategy, on board search strategy. So I'm excited to continue to get to know you all.
Thanks for being with us.